Welcome into the PFF NFL Daily. Today discussing players who stood out during the preseason, Sam. I know it doesn't always translate to the regular season, but it is nice to see either young players or just breakout players, whatever it might be, see them play well during the regular season. And there are roles and jobs won by good preseason performances. So let's go through some of those. I'll let you kick it off with some of the players who stood out with great, excellent preseason performances.
Yeah, I don't want to focus on him too much because I think he's in a different category of player than the ones we're going to be looking at primarily in this. But I think it's worth noting that Justin Fields had a really good preseason. We spent a lot of time talking about how the Bears have fairly systematically ruined the team around him. You know, they stripped it of basically all other talent, whether it's offensive line, whether it's receiving options, whether it's defense, whatever. There's not much around Justin Fields. Didn't stop Justin Fields looking pretty good this preseason. Had a PFF grade of 90. Generally looked very impressive. So I think it's just worth putting that out there. Doesn't necessarily mean, it's going to translate under the regular season when the competition is going to mean more, when the supporting cast is going to mean more. But it's a good first sign, I think. Another quarterback, though, one I think that it does mean a bit more for is Sam Ehlinger from the Indianapolis Colts. He had a great preseason, showed off some really impressive athleticism, running around, which is something he did a lot at Texas. And look, Ehlinger's a guy that isn't going to be starting anytime soon, that is sort of battling for a spot on a roster. And I think he showed that, he could be a backup to Matt Ryan if the Colts needed him to be that guy.
Huge preseason for Ehlinger, who is kind of like a Taysom Hill or a Jalen Hurts, who I think you could look at that rushing ability that came from college and say, hey, that can translate at the NFL level, but there's development needed as a passer, a little bit more development, say, than even a Jalen Hurts. But it is nice having that baseline. We always talk about if you do have a running quarterback, you raise the floor of the offense. When you have a backup quarterback like an Ehlinger, you have something to fall back on. If Matt Ryan can't make a start or two, have Ehlinger come in. You could build a little run game around him and create some easier throws. So, yeah, I think that was huge. Had a great run the other night, 50-plus yarder against the Bucs. Really impressive job by Ehlinger. Another offensive player that we've talked about a little bit here is Isaiah Likely, the tight end from the Baltimore Ravens. I don't want to rehash everything we talked about on the big show, but he's a long tight end who just made a ton of plays in traffic. And it was one of those where the hype from preseason, if you just followed any Ravens beat writers, it's like, hey, there's Isaiah Likely. He makes one of these plays per day. Sometimes you hear that and it doesn't show up, but with Likely, it showed up in the game where he really dominated multiple games.
Yeah, we've said before that preseason, the guys where you missed on them early, where it becomes very apparent very quickly that the league just got it wrong. There's no way this guy should have been drafted where he was drafted. That feels like something we could be saying about Isaiah Likely sooner rather than later, if not already. When you watch his tape in preseason, he just looks so polished at everything as a receiver. Now, okay, receiver isn't all of a job when it comes to tight end. In theory, you got to do some blocking as well, and that's still more of a work in progress. But what he's doing as a receiver, he's good at all aspects of it. He's good at route running. He's good at understanding space in zones. He's good at understanding leverage in man coverage. He's got great hands. He's great after the catch. I mean, put all that together, and that is like a dynamic weapon if he wasn't already, a good athlete as well. So, I mean, he should absolutely have a significant part in this Baltimore Ravens offense, which, could use the extra target. Obviously, Mark Andrews is going to be the number one guy from a tight end standpoint, probably the offensive standpoint. But if Isaiah Likely turns into, real deal extra target, that's a huge boost for this Baltimore Ravens offense.
Any other names that stood out to you, Sam? I have a couple under the radar linebackers, but I'm going to save those guys for later.
Yeah, Miami Dolphins receiver Eric Ezukanma, I thought played really well. A lot of connections with Skylar Thompson when Thompson had that great week 2 preseason game. This has been a really deep wide receiver class again when it comes to rookies. And, all you can ask for these guys low down the depth chart is to show up, make a few big catches, and, show that you can play at this level.
A couple of the under the radar defensive players I did want to highlight. First, Sam Kamara from the Chicago Bears. So not a lot of people know about Kamara. He only played a handful of snaps last year, but every time you looked up, there are some of these pass rushers that that stand out in the preseason. It doesn't always translate, right, Sam? We've been doing preseason games since 2013, so this doesn't mean it's going to immediately translate for Kamara. He came out of Stony Brook last year, undrafted free agent. Like I said, only played a handful of snaps last season, but he had an excellent preseason rushing the passer, showed really good power, was pushing the pocket. So he's 275 pounds. And it stands out to me because it's the Bears, and they've got just, some openings along that defensive front opposite Robert Quinn. And, Quinn's the only experienced guy there. So Kamara is a guy that, breaks out for a team where playing time could be available because the competition isn't exactly deep there at edge defender for the Bears.
Yeah, the Bears have had some. I just started this thing saying that the supporting cast around Justin Fields and the lack of talent on the roster generally has been poor. But the Bears have actually had quite a lot of standout performers in preseason, which, again, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. I think the bigger telling point or learning takeaway from preseason is when guys play particularly badly relative to expectations. But there have been a lot of Chicago Bears actually put their hand up and play well this preseason. Lachavius, whichever way we're pronouncing that, Simmons, a guard they drafted in the 7th round in 2020, had a great preseason, and the Bears have a pretty terrible offensive line on paper. So, there are guys that are saying, hey, maybe how about us? The guys in front of us don't look great. You might need to turn to the bench and see what else you have on this roster. And at least those guys have said, at the very minimum, we've cleared this hurdle. And the next one is seeing what they can do in the regular season.
I didn't know that we were going to talk only Bears, and we should have compared notes a little bit better here, that the Bears were going to dominate this episode. But first, we'll get into a few more players, but get ready for the NFL Week 1 action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Bet just $5 on any football game and get $200 in free bets instantly. And now everyone can experience the thrill of DraftKings early win promotion. You get up 7 and you win. Bet on any NFL team of your choice, and if your team leads by 7 points at any point during the game, you get paid instantly, even if your team loses. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF to get $200 in free bets instantly when you place a $5 bet on any football game. It's promo code PFF only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum $5 deposit and wager. $200 issued as 8 $25 free bets. So the other Bear that I wanted to mention was undrafted free agent Jack Sanborn, linebacker. He had an excellent preseason. Another linebacker, Sterling Weatherford, kind of converted from safety in college out of Miami of Ohio. Colts undrafted free agent linebacker. He's had an excellent preseason. And the one other name I wanted to highlight on the defensive side was Derek Rivers, former second-round pick for the New England Patriots. I talked about him on the big show a little bit too. Rushed the passer extremely well. This Texans defense, look, I don't know what to make of it, but there were a few defenses that just felt fast and like they were playing hard. The Texans were one of them for me this preseason. The Raiders were one of them. But Derek Rivers for the Texans looked like a legitimate pass rusher, again, for a team that could use a few more options off the edge. And I think Rivers may have started to show that former second-round pick potential.
Yeah, one more name I think is worth throwing out there, a veteran. Geno Smith played pretty well this preseason and, won the starting quarterback job for Seattle. Now, he got a little bit fortunate in that Drew Lock somewhere along the way contracted COVID, missed the second preseason game, missed an opportunity, say, to go out there and show that he was going to play at the same kind of level. But it seems fairly consistent that throughout the process, Geno Smith was just a better quarterback, better than Drew Lock, which, okay, like the bar is not high, right? Like we're not asking for miracles here to just be a better quarterback than Drew Lock, but he went out there, he showed that he was the better passer of the two. He had actually quite a lot of big time throws. Not all of them were caught by a lot of his receivers. So the numbers didn't necessarily go in his favor as much as they should have. But he just looks more competent. I mean, that's the word. Like, I don't want to be too harsh on old Drew Lock, but Geno Smith looked like a more competent quarterback, and it looked a lot less random what the results of the throw were going to be on any given play. You know what I mean? Drew Lock would drop back, close his eyes, and heave it, and it could go anywhere. But
now you are
Geno
getting
Smith
mean.
Actually, it is. All right, that's a little bit mean. But Geno Smith actually looked like he could operate this offense and be reasonable, which is what we saw from him last year. And it seemed like an outlier relative to the rest of his career, but maybe there is competent quarterback play in Geno Smith this year.
Yeah, Geno Smith did have 3 big time throws a couple weeks ago. One of them was dropped. One of them was knocked away late by a great play by the defense, so it didn't necessarily show up in the stats. But Geno did look very good. Need to correct myself from earlier. Derek Rivers was a 3rd-round pick, not a 2nd-round pick. I've already corrected that, so I knew something was off in my head. But either way, Rivers has had a really impressive preseason. Can't forget Dameon Pierce, his teammate with the Texans, might be running back 1 there for Houston. So leave us some notes in the comments. Who stood out this preseason? It's a PS.